I really think I tried to solve what is in my mind a spiritual problem. So our worthiness, our lovability, like those are spiritual questions to me. And I tried to solve it with everything but a spiritual solution. I tried to solve it with therapy and affirmations and self-care activities and things that got close. Like yoga got me really close. And for some people, yoga might get them there, right? It doesn't have to be sacred feminine ceremony for everyone. It won't be. But whatever takes you to that place where you can touch your own divinity, and then you can see that in everyone and everything around you, it's so powerful.
Welcome to the Reframe, where fear is brave. Today, we are joined by Melinda Scime, a 15-year clinical trauma therapist who has taken up her calling as a sacred feminine priestess full time. Our conversation explores the process of identifying your soul's work, how to listen to your intuition, and how we can learn to truly trust ourselves and settle into an authentic feeling of self-love. There is a richness and a juiciness that comes when we tap into our authenticity and life's purpose. I know you will thoroughly enjoy this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, or leave a review. Now let's dive in.
Well, Melinda, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation around reclaiming self-love and self-trust. And I love that you come from a background as a clinical therapist and also sacred priestess. So I'm really curious how you're going to weave those together on this conversation.
Beautiful. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you too. And excited to dive into the story of how I came to be where I am, and I do weave those two things together.
Well, I'd love to hear how you got to where you're at today and serving women the way you are today.
Beautiful, thank you. So I'm going to tell the sort of long version because I feel like it's helpful. So my belief is that we all come into the world deeply connected to our souls, knowing our worth, really truly innately loving and trusting ourselves. But over time, we forget the truth of who we are, right? And to me, the truth of who we are is divine love embodied. And so our life experiences, whether it be trauma or social conditioning, um, these things interfere with how we feel about ourselves and get in the way of us trusting ourselves. We start to feel that we're not good enough, that we have to earn love. I think we all have our own version of this story, right? And over time, we get disconnected from our inner knowing. We're really trained, especially if you're socialized as a female in this culture, we're really trained to look to external authority for answers. So, again, we all have our own version of how this story has played out in our lives. Mine includes some pretty significant trauma, surviving childhood sexual abuse, surviving domestic violence in my early romantic relationships. And I really struggled with anxiety and depression from a very young age, but I was an expert at hiding it. I was one of those women who coped by overachieving, by just being super nice, being a perfectionist, always working on keeping everyone around me happy. So I really just tucked all my struggles away neatly until I got to my first year away at college. And something about being away from home the first time just really opened the floodgates on my emotions. And my mental health really plummeted. I was having severe panic attacks. I could hardly leave my dorm room. My depression was really severe, and it had my mind just warped in the way that depression can do that. And I really couldn't see any way for things to get better. Like I felt alone, I felt hopeless, and I had a suicide attempt that was not successful. Um, and by some miracle, I made my way to the campus counseling center. I had a couple of good friends, and that's when I started my personal journey with therapy. So I came home from college having had a really tough year. Um, and I had a missed period. And I assumed it was like the stress of everything that I had been going through for the last few months. And my mom was like, just take a pregnancy test. Like, you just need to know for sure. And I remember that one of my dear friends from college was like, if you're pregnant, there's no God. And I knew what she meant. She meant like, you have been through so much. This cannot possibly be laid at your feet right now, also. And when I did find out that I was pregnant, I actually felt the exact opposite. I really felt like divine intervention to me. Like, okay, now I have a reason to live, not just for myself, but also for my child. And I was really determined to create a beautiful life for what turned out to be my first daughter. So I continued in therapy and I approached my healing the way I approached everything at that time, that overachieving, perfectionist kind of mentality. Like I read every self-help book. I did all my homework from therapy. I was like, I will be the best client. And I was very motivated. I was very compliant. I did a lot of hard work. I did EMDR to process my past traumas. I also started practicing yoga and meditating. I got very into self-help. And I really did start to shift, my relationship with my body and my beliefs about myself. But I still had this like deep-seated belief that something was wrong with me and that I was not lovable. And that really propelled a lot of my behavior. So I still overfunctioned. I still was an overachiever. I really was just still hustling to try to earn that love and approval. And I had my daughter, I was a single mom, I worked as a waitress, I went to college, I continued on to get my doctorate in psychology, and I got a good job in my field. It was like my first real job with health insurance and a retirement plan and all that good stuff. I got married, I bought a house. Like I really checked all those boxes that had been handed to me from society. And I felt just like empty and sad and anxious. I was sick a lot. I was tired all the time. And I was still doing all the things. I was still in therapy. I was still reading self-help books. I was practicing yoga. And I really thought, like, okay, I guess if I'm doing all those things and my life looks so good on paper, I just must be like broken. Like something really is wrong with me if I still feel this way. So it was right around my 30th birthday, so 2008, I read The Artist's Way. And that was like a really life-changing book for me by Julia Cameron. And I also went on my first women's retreat around that time. And I really reconnected with my intuition for the first time. Like I had just been living my life trying to get everybody else's approval and love and check those boxes from society. And when I actually slowed down and went inside, I was like, oh, there's the voice of my soul. There's what I really want. There's what actually matters to me. And so I made a lot of big changes in my life. I ended up leaving my job. Well, first I went part-time at my job and I opened a yoga studio. And then a year later, I left my job entirely and I opened my dream wellness center in my community. I opened my private practice as a therapist. And that was my biggest dreams come true. And I really lived inside of that place for a long time. And during that time is when I created Badass Self-Care, my signature program, which I know we're going to talk more about today. I wrote 2 books. I was teaching online. I was really loving my life. I had another baby. And in early 2020, right before the pandemic, I started to hear the message from my intuition that it was time to close the yoga studio and it was time to sell the wellness center. And I just could not believe it because I had a lot of my identity wrapped up in that. Like that was who I was in my community. So it took me a minute to get on board. But at this point, I had been working for years to really trust my intuition and to follow those whispers. So I did. I moved forward and closed my yoga studio, sold the wellness center. I moved my therapy practice to a small office that I rented. I had owned my wellness center. And it created a lot of space in my life. And I really plan to spend that space teaching more and writing more. And I thought, once again, you'll see the theme. I always think I have it figured out. And then life comes along and offers me something new. So at the very end of 2021, it was December 2021, I went to my first Sacred Feminine ceremony. I'd never heard of such a thing. I saw a short video on Instagram from Sarah Jenks, who I know we both know and work with. And as soon as it started, like it was less than 5 minutes into it, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Like, this is the piece that has been missing. I just got goosebumps thinking about it. It was so powerful. So I very shortly after started my training as a priestess. I went to Glastonbury, England, also known as Avalon, for my 44th birthday in 2022. And when I was there, I very clearly got the message that it was time to go full time into this soul work, my work as a priestess. And I had always, I was always working as a therapist and doing something else, whether it was the yoga studio, the wellness center, teaching, writing, retreats, but it was time to make the shift. And so last year, I stopped seeing therapy clients. It's been almost exactly a year. It was July of 2023, and started working full time as a priestess, holding ceremony online and in person, doing group programs and one-on-one work. And I just love it. It's amazing. And so it's this process of reclaiming self-love and self-trust. It's ongoing. It's not something for me where we like check a box and we're like, oh yeah, I did that. I'm done. It's an ongoing, ever evolving, dynamic process. And there are times when it's hard to trust yourself and to trust those intuitive nudges. And there's a lot of, even still today, it's only been 1 year since I stopped practicing as a therapist. There's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of my career trajectory and my journey, but it's just so beautiful to really have that foundation. And part of how I built that foundation of self-love and self-trust is badass self-care. And the last piece really clicked in with the Sacred Feminine ceremony, which I know we'll talk more about. So that is my long and winding story of how I got to where I am today.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. I think one that many people, many listeners will be able to relate to a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about when you were able to check all those boxes, but there was still kind of this hollowness inside? What was the piece for you that you noticed that you started filling up, that started there was less and less hollowness and more life inside, or fullness?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was really the shift from doing what I thought other people expected me to do to doing what I wanted. So it started with that simple question of what do I want? And it might sound so straightforward, but I had truly not asked myself that. Like, I had a baby when I was 19 and I just was determined to create a good life for my child. So I just put my head down and was like, what do I need to do? Like, I need to go to work. I need to earn good grades. I need to finish this doctorate program, and etc. So I really, by the time I finished my doctorate and started my first job, I was 28, 29 years old. And it was like I lifted my head up for the first time and was like, ooh, none of this feels good. Like, I was working, 50 hours a week. I was away from my child a lot. It was not, I was doing important work, but it was not my soul's work. It's not the mission that I came to this lifetime with. And so that disconnect is really what fueled me. And when I did take that time, it was at that first women's retreat to turn inward and like, what do I really want? I remember, again, it's now seems like such a simple thing. Many people are probably familiar with doing like an ideal day meditation. It was wild to me how clear it was. Like, oh, I know exactly how I want to spend my day, and it's not how I'm spending it right now. And then it was just about being brave enough to, I love the name, I love the name of your podcast, Where Fear is Brave, right? Like, being brave enough to take the step. I can remember the day that I told my boss. So my boss was a very well accomplished psychologist, very well known in the field, you know, just super serious, powerful man. And I can remember the day that I told him that I wanted to work part-time so I could open a yoga studio. And he just kind of looked at me like I had three heads. But you know what? When I left there, I felt amazing. I can remember driving home in the car and just, I felt so free that I had taken that step and I had spoken my truth.
I think where a lot of people stumble or get confused or lost on that journey of finding their sense of self or re-identifying with their sense of self, their life's purpose, is one, we're not taught how to do that. And then how do you coach people to be able to tease apart that voice in their head that is that inner critic, that chattering voice that which created that checklist, right? Influenced by our culture and every our childhood experiences. How do you start? How is the voice different for you? That quiet, knowing soul voice. How do people start to tease those apart so they can identify which is which?
Mhm. Such a good question. For me, it's a lot about the body. So much wisdom is in our body, and we are not taught. We're actually taught the opposite, right? Like neck up, thinking and planning and analyzing, which again are very masculine, not in terms of gender, but in terms of energies. Those are masculine things, right? Thinking, doing, planning. Whereas feminine energy is that being and feeling and receiving. So I think a great way to start to shift into that is to shift into your body and just noticing, how does my body feel around different people? How does my body feel in different environments? How does my body feel when I'm doing different activities? So we can learn to tune into those unique sensations of our bodies, and everyone's body is different. But we can learn what feels like a yes in my body and what feels like a no in my body. And that is your intuition speaking to you. Sometimes I do receive messages in terms of words from my intuition, but very often it's body based, like a very clear, like, no, that's not for me, and a very clear, like, ooh, yes, I want to go toward that. So I think any practice that helps you drop from your mind down into your body is a great way to start connecting with your intuition, with your soul, with that wise inner knowing that's always been inside of you. And then as a therapist, one my favorite really way to approach therapy is called internal family systems, which is basically the idea that we all have different parts inside of ourselves. It's not pathological or disordered, it's just being a human. And so we can get curious about our different parts. Like, oh, there's the part of me that wants everyone to like me. Most of us have some version of that part. There's the part of me that wants to make sure I can pay my bills. Yeah, that's good. That's a helpful part, right? And so we can make space for all of the different parts of ourselves and greet all of them with love and compassion. And then we get to decide, like I think of, you know, a bus and all the parts of me can ride on the bus. There is space for everyone. But who do I want driving the bus, right? I really want my most wise, grounded, core self driving that bus as much as possible. And of course, I'm, taking in and listening and meeting with all my other parts, but I'm really trying to make my decisions and my actions come from my wise, grounded self. And so just getting curious about, the different parts of ourselves I think is helpful too. And then we can start to notice like, oh, there's that wise part or there's that scared part.
Yeah, I love that example. I always share a similar example, but if you had a long Viking table or European style table, and you invited all your parts to come sit and join you, and then have conversation, get to know them, because I think part of that is even unearthing that wise sage archetype that we all have within us. But if we've never had that in front of us as a someone in our life or as an example, sometimes it feels really inaccessible to what are the flavors of the sage or the wise one, the calm one. So that kind of goes into the self-trust piece. So if you're sitting at that table and you start getting to know all these parts and start to build relationship really with yourself, a much more intimate relationship with all aspects of yourself, and you realize that scared little 7-year-old has been running the ship, right? It's been driving the bus.
Yeah.
Then, which most people have a version of this in their lives, and they make choices that from that place that have not maybe been the best. How do we learn how to trust ourselves when we look behind and we realize the havoc that we've created for our lives, sometimes in other people's lives, just because of misplaced or just not knowing ourselves well enough, not being connected enough?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree that we all have some version of that scared young child part who has probably directed a lot of our life. And so to begin rebuilding self-trust, start with self-compassion. We have always been doing the best that we can. That is true for all of us, even when it doesn't feel that way. So, beginning with self compassion and awareness, just a simple noticing. And this piece can take a long time. This kind of, I imagine so many of us, we're just like running through life, and it's like all of our stuff is behind us, and we think we can outrun it, right? And so we keep going and going. And this process is like, stop and turn around and look at everything that you're running from. And again, this is a great time for a therapist, right? This is not work that we need to do alone. Like, this is big work. So this is a great time to have a companion, a professional with you, whether that's a therapist or a coach, to help you pause and look at all those things that you're running from. And we can only create self-trust when we can have love and compassion for all the parts of ourselves. As long as we are saying, nope, not that one. Mm-mm, nope, I'm disowning her. They're not invited to the table, right? As long as we're doing that, it's going to be really hard to create trust within the system, because all of our parts are going to want to know that they're loved and that they're invited to the table or to ride on the bus. And so that act of pausing and turning toward yourself and finding love and forgiveness and understanding for all the parts of you is going to start that process of self-trust growing inside. And then it's a relationship like any other relationship. So if you wanted another person to trust you, what would you do, right? You would want to be dependable. Like if you said, I'm going to call you on Thursday at 10, you would call on Thursday at 10. So if you say to yourself, I'm going to check back in with myself during my meditation on Thursday at 10, show up for yourself, right? Be dependable and spend time with yourself. Again, we are we all have so many things on our plates. I think more plates than it's even possible, more things on the plate than it's even possible for humans. Like, it's a really hard time to be a human. So carving out time to be with yourself is super powerful, and it really will make every other aspect of your life easier. It truly will. It's one of those paradoxes where it feels like, no, I don't have time to go on a walk alone or write in my journal or take that class or whatever it is. But by doing that, you will create time in your life, because everything is just more smooth when you do have a solid relationship with yourself.
I completely agree. I think it's also on that same vein of reconnecting with what that initial separation that's created all of the contrast of I'm not good enough, I'm not loved enough, all these hidden parts of ourselves. It's bringing that back together.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about, I'm just personally curious, what
Mhm.
the sacred feminine ceremony aspect. So how does that fit into all of that, all of this conversation that we've been having? Because I really feel like there's a lot of juice there that we're talking about more of the structure of things. Kind of in therapy, a lot of times we'll start to feel like that. But one of the things in my therapy practice also that I've noticed is there's the juice is missing in a lot of people's lives, and all rivers lead to the same place, right? So for you, sacred feminine or sacred feminine practices is kind of what's fed that for you. Could you talk a little bit more about the importance of that and how you weave that into all of this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so as I said earlier, that thread of feeling not good enough, not worthy, not lovable, that was with me until I found Sacred Feminine Ceremony. So, I mean, years, decades of therapy work and teaching self-care and doing the behaviors and having the mindset, it was still there. It still existed kind of just really deep inside of me. And I honestly had thought, I'll just have that my whole life. That's just something. Like I've been through a lot. I have a beautiful life, and I'll always sort of have that nagging, I'm not really worthy of love feeling inside of me. And then when I started the work of Sacred Feminine Ceremony, what happened is that I rediscovered myself as sacred. So I really, I had the idea and I had even taught we are divine love embodied. I really understood that in my head, but it did not sink into my very like bones until ceremony. And I think it's because ceremony just cuts through everything and it very quickly and very powerfully takes you right to your soul, right to the truth of who you are. And so when you get to that, like you can't unknow it. And I'm so passionate about it because imagine if everyone understood not only that they are a sacred being, worthy inherently, lovable inherently, nothing can take that away. Not only understanding that about ourselves, but about each other, right? Imagine how we would treat one another if we really understood, like it brings tears to my eyes, if we really understood the sacredness of not just every human, but every living thing in our planet. Like this work is just so desperately needed in this moment. So for me, I really think I tried to solve what is in my mind a spiritual problem. So our worthiness, our lovability, like those are spiritual questions to me. And I tried to solve it with everything but a spiritual solution. I tried to solve it with therapy and affirmations and self-care activities and things that got close. Like yoga got me really close. And for some people, yoga might get them there, right? It doesn't have to be sacred feminine ceremony for everyone. It won't be. But whatever takes you to that place where you can touch your own divinity and then you can see that in everyone and everything around you, it's so powerful.
And that the thought that comes to mind is the absolute medicine that the world needs right now, just like what you were saying, that we're in a time of such division that we don't, even as a culture, we don't have time, I don't think, to sit down for years of therapy, right?
Yes.
Like we need something a little bit more potent. And the more individuals that have the opportunity to experience like what you offer to the world, it spreads like wildfire. It really does in the households, those that shift. And when they see, imagine a mother walking into her household, like I can just like feel the power behind it. And she's shifted. Now her children are going to,
Yeah.
without even having to do a thing, are going to feel that and engage differently. Her husband or her partner is going to engage differently. Um, I also really like that you said that it comes in many forms, because it could be the yoga mat, it could be at a particular church somebody goes to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's many pathways there.
Hmm.
And it is so powerful, just like you're saying, that ripple effect. It's literally world-changing work. And sometimes I have to remind myself, because I love it so much, that I'm like, am I doing enough? Like, is this, when you're a therapist, it's hard, of course, but you also can see that you are impacting people's lives, right? You can see, like, oh, I helped this person heal from whatever, and this person went on to do whatever. So, and when I was a therapist, I absolutely loved it, and it felt hard. And again, I was so close to my soul's work, like I was really, really close. But for me, it's the ceremonial work and the group work that is really my, zone of genius, as they say, the place where I really shine. So it does feel easy. It does feel more effortless. And I think, like, oh, am I doing enough, or did I stop doing something that I should have kept doing? And so it's such a good reminder that of a couple things. I think when we are doing what we're really here to do, it does often feel effortless. And so we can minimize the power of it. And also, I just love the reminder of the ripple effect that folks leave, and then that carries out into their life. And the more people that we touch in this way, it really does have the potential to create powerful change.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I'd like to pivot just a little bit. One thing that I find people struggle with quite a bit is life purpose, and finding that, and I'm sure you heard it constantly in therapy, like, I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know who I am. But it's just such a common question. What words of wisdom would you have for someone that is struggling with sense of self and their life purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's beautiful. I love that so many of us want to know our life's purpose and want to be on that path. And my take is a little different. I really believe that our purpose is simply to be who we really are. So to be the fully expressed version of ourselves. And again, that takes a lot of peeling away the layers, right? Of the expectations and the fears and the conditioning, to get down to who am I really, and what am I really here to do? And ultimately, it's simply to be yourself. And again, ceremony is so helpful to get us to that core of who we really are. And if you feel like I have no idea who I really am, you can start with, what do I know I'm definitely not? Or what are the pieces of my life that I'm doing right now that don't feel aligned, that don't feel authentic? And again, you can go back to your body for some of that wisdom, and you can see where those different feelings pop up, and it can change over time. So, for me, when I first started on this journey of really coming home to myself, it was okay, I was working specifically with very young children with very severe behavioral disorders. And I was like, this is not my soul's purpose. Like, this is not aligned. Being a therapist for this population is not. So I made the shift into private practice and working primarily with women's issues. And then I felt, oh, yoga, this is a place where I really feel like myself. This has really helped me heal. This is a thing I want to share with the world. So I shifted into that. And it was like I was getting closer. And who knows? You could talk to me in 5 years and I could be like, Then after Sacred Feminine Ceremony, I found blah de blah, and that was my purpose, right? So it's not even so much about what we're doing, but it's who we're being while we're doing it. Am I being my authentic self? Am I showing up in integrity? Am I following what feels aligned for me? And less worrying about like finding the exact thing. I have zero regrets about all those different pathways I've gone down because they all have led me to where I am now. And I still bring, I'm not teaching a yoga class, but everything that I know about teaching a yoga class is still in me and still influences me. I'm not doing therapy when I'm leading a ceremony, but everything I know about therapy is in there. And I actually do bring internal family systems into my ceremonies and retreats. And it's really beautiful to see that combination. So, again, I don't know. In 5 years, 10 years, I could say something else is most aligned for me, but it's just about tuning into yourself, following those breadcrumbs, and showing up. It's scary to show up as who you really are. We build these personas because we all want to be loved. That is a very natural human feeling. And it can feel like you're dying. It can feel terrifying to be who you really are. I come from a family of scientists who do not believe in religion or spirituality. And so for me to say I'm a priestess and my family is like very out there. Like it was out there when I was a yoga teacher, but now to be like, and now I am a priestess. And you know what? My family still loves me. They may not understand what exactly it is I'm talking about or doing. And it's when you have the foundation of your self-love and for me feeling into that divine love, you know you'll be okay. It's still hard, but it's less like I'm gonna die if someone doesn't like me feeling. Um, yeah, so I think that connection with yourself and connection with the divine is really supportive. And you don't have to turn your life upside down. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to do anything like that. You can take a small step, like, hey, I'd actually rather take a walk tonight than watch TV. Or I'd rather read, like, I love to read like ridiculous young adult fantasy fiction. Like, I don't actually want to read another self-help book. I want to read this ridiculous young adult fiction, right? So it can be these small things, and then you'll start to build up your confidence over time. And then the best thing that happens is when you can fully just like be yourself, it's like a flashing sign for people that want to be with you and that are drawn to you. And you can build really beautiful relationships that are based on who you really are, not the performance you put on in your day-to-day life. And we still might need to put the performance on sometimes. That's okay, right? Like there are times when it's protective and it makes sense. I'm not saying we never slip those masks back on again, but we want, or at least I want to be in a place where I can mostly just be who I really am and feel safe and be expressed and hopefully give other people permission to do the same.
I think that's beautifully put. And I'm really grateful that you've done the work, that you've gone through this life process to get to where you're at so you can be an example for so many people. I think that's a really important to have in our lives, people that we can look up to and set
Thank you.
example for us. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That makes me think for any listeners listening or watching right now, it is and really you were touching on this too, it's a life process. It's not something that just happens overnight. It's really an unfolding of getting to know yourself on a much more intimate, connected, divine level. And as you were speaking just a minute ago, I kept feeling like retraction, like expansion, and then this like retraction out of fear. Like I was just kind of following you through that process. And wanted to highlight that that's a natural piece of stepping into a boldness And then all of a sudden your nervous system realizes like, whoa, we haven't done this before in this way, and then retract back, right? And then the more that you're able to hold that new, bold, delicious space, the longer it will maintain in your nervous system. But there is kind of this little whiplash feeling, just
Hmm.
that it's a normal part of the process, because you can internalize a sense of failure, like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I'm that judgment, that criticism.
Absolutely. And it's so important. I'm glad you brought up the nervous system because any change to our nervous system feels like danger, right? Even if it's a change we want to make, it still registers as danger. Like our nervous system just wants things to stay the same, even if the same is not feeling good. It feels comfortable and safe. And so that's why somatic practices and think tools for our nervous system are so important on this journey. And it's like we create that safe space and then we take the little step and we might need to come back to the safe sanctuary, and that's okay. And our sanctuary and our sense of safety and our nervous system can grow with us over time. And it also reminds me to be mindful when you are stepping more fully into your authentic self and sharing more of who you really are. Be picky about who you share that with, you know? So it doesn't need to be for the whole internet unless that feels super safe to you. It can be for your closest friend that you know can hold space for that, or your partner, or your therapist, or whomever it is. Like it's like you have a newborn baby, right? You don't just hand your newborn baby to anyone. Like you're going to be picky about who gets to hold that baby. So be picky about who gets to receive this new version of you or this new part of you when you're first unveiling it, and protect it.
Mm, I like that. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to make sure to highlight?
Hmm. No, I feel like we talked about so much in such a short time. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I hope that even if there's just one little thread or nugget in there for someone to take with them, I hope it's an encouragement to slow down, check in with yourself, and find that place within you that knows that you can trust yourself, that knows that you are lovable and worthy. It's in all of us. You might be like me. I thought it just wasn't in me. I thought it wasn't just for me in this lifetime. It's truly in all of us. Some of us just have more to excavate to get to it, and go through that process with as much love and compassion for yourself as you can. It's totally worth it. It's so worth it.
Mm, absolutely. And the world needs it right now.
Yeah. Yes, we do. We do. We need you.
Well, thank you again for coming and taking your time and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk with you.
The holy in me sees the holy in you. The wounded in me sees the wounded in you. As Ram Dass says, we are all on a journey of walking each other home. Thank you for joining us, and it would mean a lot if you would follow, subscribe, and share this episode or podcast with someone that you know it is right for. Make sure to look at the episode notes for your 12-page lunar cycle download. This is a quick, easy-to-use reference in working with the monthly lunar energies rather than against them. And until next time, be well.